Welcome back to another episode of Corvette Weekly. This is our week on with Brandon and David as well. So say hi to the other gentlemen that fulfill the horsepower pit crew commitment. They're in the house, and of course, Brandon is busy saving lives, so he's doing this from work, which is awesome. Let's big round of applause, big thumbs up for Brandon for taking some time out of his day to join us to do the Corvette Weekly thing. So, again, guys, welcome to the show. Corvette Weekly is where we discuss everything and anything Corvette related. As usual, brought to you by NCM Insurance. Check out the link in the description down below. Get your quote for your insurance on your car. Most of the people that have done it have saved upwards of 50% on their insurance. In step number 5, just make sure you put where it says, where did you hear about us? Just put in horsepower obsessed or HPO for the best possible rates. So anyway, guys, we're going to get kind of right into it here because me, David, and Brandon were just talking on the off the camera kind of thing. And we had a good bit of a interesting conversation that I said I wish I had waited to ask Brandon about until we were on the air here because it was a really good conversation. This is kind of what we do.
Yeah.
Like if me and David and Brandon get on a phone call, this is exactly how it plays out. This is basically us on a phone call. We're talking
Right.
cars, we're talking YouTube, just all the good Corvette stuff. Yeah, so let's see. We got Blue Vets in the house, Paula Monaco, 2020 Matrix 8, Jeremy, Elijah, Luke, AARPM. Nice. Yeah, everybody, AARPM just got his AWE exhaust put on his C7 Corvette. Of course, he loves it. AWE is always knocking it out of the park with these things. But yeah, so congratulations to Aaron for that because I'm sure he's loving it. John Perkins said that Dana's Corvette, of course, sounded great too. And that is because me and Dana just recently put the AWE exhaust on his C7 Z06. So,
Oh, nice.
yeah, and
Nice.
it sounds awesome.
I bet it does. Yeah, I like Dana's car. I like that color.
Yeah, dude, Shark Gray is one of the best
Shark gray.
grays that they ever put on a Corvette, and then they discontinued it after 16.
Yep. Yeah, I love shark gray. It's so amazing.
Yep. General Lee's in the house. What's up, man? Keith, good luck with your
Hey,
surgery.
General Lee.
Hey, Charlie.
So someone's got some surgery coming up, it sounds like. Wheeler O'Hara
Matt
leaves a
Hurley.
thumbs up. Thank you. Guys, that's another thing. I don't see Shane in here tonight, so let's keep those thumbs ups going. It would really help the channel, of course. I don't want to talk too much about that. I hate how often I say this on this channel, but it really does help a lot. And it seems like every time I remind you guys, we get a good bit more. So, yeah, I promise to not bring it up so much if you guys actually smash the thumbs up for us. Yeah. So anyway, let's talk a little bit about the most recent trailer or teaser, we'll say, from Chevy, because they are now telling us right off the bat that we're going to see this car July 25th. Now, I do want to clarify this because apparently, if you any of you guys, I'm sure some of you guys watch Rick Conti's channel, he's telling us we are not going to see the car. We're only going to hear the specs on July 25th. So I have not heard anything like that, but you know, Rick has been right in the past about stuff, so I assume he is probably correct about this. If that's the case, then we're not going to see the car on the 25th, and that's kind of disappointing, but we are going to hear some specs finally, which means we're going to find out, is this thing a flat plane crank? Is it a cross plane? Is it in fact twin turboed, which we already pretty much know the answer to that. Yeah, all that stuff. And 11-second eclipse, I thought for sure you'd be 10-second Z06 by now, but he says we have 145 people watching live. We need 145 thumbs ups. Absolutely, guys. Smash the thumbs ups. Let's get to our typical 100 by 8 o'clock. That's 20 minutes from now. And then 200 by 8:30 would be really awesome. So anyway, so let's talk about number one. If you guys haven't seen it yet, the new teaser from GM. I'm going to throw it up here just really quickly just because I know a lot of you guys have probably already seen this. But it is, in fact, confirmed. We are going to see something for the ZR1 on July 25th. So right there, you can see the new Corvette flag, the silver Corvette flag, July 25th, and right below the ZR1. So there is no confusing that July 25th is going to show us anything but ZR1 content. So we are definitely getting that. Now, the video, the teaser, it's not even worth playing because it literally just says that. That's pretty much it. It gives us a little more of a sound clip, but honestly, it sounds pretty much the same as the ones we've seen in the past. Still
Right.
a little bit up in the air as to whether it's a flat plane or a cross plane. I can hear both now. I really can. I think honestly I'm starting to go insane from hearing this car so often because I can't tell which one it is. But
And you're just going back and forth, back and forth, back and
yeah,
forth. Every time you hear it, yep.
I am. And that's
I'm,
I'll hear it once and I'm like, no, dude, that's a cross plane. And then I'll hear it again. I'm like, oh, I don't know. That maybe that's flat plane. Like, and it depends on what I'm listening to it on. On my phone, I can guarantee you on my phone, 100% it's a cross plane crank. Then I hear it on my computer with a better sound system, and I'm like, man, that actually sounds like a flat plane. And I do. I'm going back and forth so often that I'm like ready to rip my hair out. But
that means GM's trailers are doing their job, right?
100%.
Yeah, that's the whole point, right?
That's the whole point.
And not only is that the point, but the biggest point is to get us talking.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
What are we doing? I mean, seriously, I've had so many phone conversations about this stuff. And then the conversations on here, the conversations with some of my subscribers that are emailing me. I mean, it's the amount of conversations that GM has kind of dug up because of this. Yeah. I'll put it to you this way. I am still on the fence. I can't tell you what, at this point, I've heard from an inside source that it is a cross plane crank with twin turbo, and from a different inside source that it's a flat plane crank with a twin turbo. These two sources together have never been wrong. They have given me information in the past that has never been wrong. So which one of these two is
Somebody's
wrong?
wrong now.
Yeah, which one's
Somebody's
wrong?
wrong now.
I know,
That's
and
right.
I told both of them about. I didn't tell who the other person was, but I said there's another guy, and you guys are about to fight because one of you is wrong. But
I'm sticking cross plane. I'm gonna be the holdout. I'm still sticking cross plane.
John
I'm going
Perkins is
flat,
too.
staying on the flat train, especially after the manifold stuff.
Yeah,
I generally
we're going to talk
said
about that
it's
in a
an
second.
electric motor with awesome speakers.
You know what the sad thing is, General? You could possibly be right. That's the saddest part of all of this. Like maybe they have the exhaust tips and all the exhaust things at the Nürburgring to really throw us off. This thing is actually a fully electric car. I'll tell you what, that's the unthinkable for sure. We're going to talk about.
We have a lot to talk about.
We're going to talk about the unthinkables tonight. But honestly, General Lee, I didn't even think of that. And I know you were probably just joking, but at the same time, it's like, how unthinkable do we want to go here? Because that's pretty unthinkable. That is another thing that has come up in the rumor mill, Jeremy, is he says, what if they offer both cross plane and flat plane in different trim levels? There was a couple things that have come up to kind of rumored to be that there you could get a supercharger or a turbocharged car depending on the level. Like if you get the base, it's a supercharger. If you get the ZTK, it's a turbo. And as much as that sounds odd and unlikely, it kind of would explain why some of the cars we're seeing don't have the turbo air inlets on the shoulders of the car and stuff like that. So then I start to think, well, that it could be something like that. But then I start thinking about the fact that the amount of money that GM would have to put into this car to develop it that way would just be staggering. So that doesn't make a lot of sense. But I mean, GM definitely has got all of us thinking. That's for sure. Yeah, guys. So we got 195 watching. Let's see. We got, or actually 202 now. 95 thumbs. Is that right? 95 thumbs ups already? Are you guys killing it tonight? I love it. Let's keep doing it, guys.
Killing it.
11 Sadie Clip says that it sounds like a flat plane crank on the latest teaser video. I agree and I disagree. It depends. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. I don't know what to say for sure because unfortunately, at this point, no one really knows for sure. But is the guy on the bottom left Kai Smelly's dad? Who is that?
Kai Kelly. Is that what he meant to put?
I have no idea. Do you look like Kai Kelly?
I don't think so, but
I don't know either, but
I wish I had Kai Kelly's money.
There you go. Dude, we hit 100 thumbs ups already. You guys are killing it tonight. Let's keep rocking it. Let's hit that 200. We got 45 minutes to hit 200. or another 100. Let's do it.
Yep.
All right, so that Corvette guy says this will be a version of the LT6 with twins. Mark it. Well, at this point, I would say we're pretty far into the game to make it any kind of special request, because odds are pretty good at this point it is going to be something like that. Whether it's going to be a cross plane or a flat plane is kind of where the argument lies. And we're going to show you here in a second some parts that have leaked for the LT7. One of them is the turbo setup. And me and Brandon were discussing that pretty heavily off camera. We're going to get into that in a second as well. But
Yep.
actually, you know what? That second is right now. Let's do it. So over at the mid-engine Corvette forum.com, guys, we have a thread started here showing some LT7 parts that have leaked, possibly, question mark. I want to preface this with, no one knows for sure that these are, in fact, LT7 parts, but the person who, quote-unquote, leaked it says that they are. So, as usual, you want to take these things with a grain of salt. But it does look legit. So, scrolling down here, he says kind of the same thing. There's no source of where the pictures come from or anything, so kind of take this with a grain of salt. But here we have a very, very obvious turbo setup. And this is supposedly for the LT7. So check that thing out. Now, what is special about this to me is that this is all one part. So GM is obviously doing their best to limit turbo lag and to also maximize the amount of space that they have for this. With the way that that's set up, if this is in fact for the LT7, this would be perfectly set up for the new air intakes on the side of the car, the ones that kind of press in on the side boomerang, to literally flow air right past this thing, to literally cool the turbos while you're driving.
Right.
Now, where things get interesting is, this is kind of obviously a CAD image of the same setup. Where things get interesting, though, here is even on the CAD image, actually, Brandon, it doesn't show on the CAD image either. It doesn't show any kind of holes or anything for mounting these. So this is where things kind of got interesting for me, is that obviously we see some pictures of what clearly could be the turbo setup for the LT7, but one of the commenters down here actually pointed out the gasket for the LT6 has holes where this turbo doesn't. So either, like me and Brandon were discussing off camera, either this is an unfinished piece and those holes haven't been drilled yet, which I don't know about that now because I'm looking at the CAD image and it doesn't have holes either, or this is going to be a different engine than the LT6. So obviously, you guys know my opinion. I do not think this is just going to be pick up an LT6, drop it into the ZR1 and put turbos on it, and we're going to call it an LT7. I do not think that that's what's going to happen here. The LT7 is going to possibly be based off of the LT6, but it is going to be a different engine. And this is kind of proof of that as far as I'm concerned. Oh, Brandon. What happened to Brandon? Oh, he's still here. Hold on. Let me get you back in here, Brandon. So Brandon actually has some interesting points on this that I wanted to get there we go. Brandon, you're in here now. What do you think about all that?
So I don't know if you talked about it, but those slits on that manifold, they look like where they would have studs mounted, where it sets on a stud to hold the weight of that manifold at the bottom. Maybe that's why they don't have the holes. There's only 2 holes in the outer perimeter.
Yeah.
I don't know how that will be enough clamping force to keep it equal.
I don't see
as far as on the top, unless it's not drilled. But looks like there's slits at the bottom where it was set on studs, and the studs would mount to, and then you got the outer bolts. But I don't know how they would clamp it from the top, because it's not going to be equal clamping on that manifold. So that's the only thing that's confusing to me, is how, if they're just using studs and the 2 outer perimeter bolts, how is that going to give a clamping force on it to have the top seal? But maybe they have something with the weight up above that's going to somehow push forward. But to me, it looks like it mounts on studs, which is maybe why we don't see holes there. That's my guess. I don't know.
Well,
and Brandon, even 6 pounds of boost, like if you don't have a good seal,
yeah.
I mean, you know what I mean? Like the 2 studs and like with the 2 bolts on the outside, I don't see how you can, seal that up where you're not going to have issues with that. I'm with you on that one. Like when you look at that drawing and the thing, like I don't know how they would do that with just the studs and then 2 outer bolts. Like I'm with you.
I thought,
unless there's studs on both sides. Look at the other corner on the side that's more facing towards the turbo. there may be extra studs on that side too. It may be a whole stud mount with just the two bolts that actually bolted on. That'd be the only other thing is if there's studs on up top and bottom, and we just can't. So we only see the center studs,
Right. Okay.
and that might be the way they do the clamping force. So that would make sense because then it just pushes on and it's got better clamping force, and then the bolts just kind of guide or the studs guide it, and then the bolts kind of push the perimeter, and then you've got the center mounting. I don't know. That's just a guess. It's
I'll
just
tell you
odd.
what,
It doesn't look like a lot of turbo manifolds.
if that's the case, it would make these a lot easier to install. I can tell you that much. But I don't know because I mean, looking at the very first picture here, it looks like the entire assembly is actually on a rack where they're literally laser cutting things. Possibly, it looks like it's yeah, it looks like it's on a CNC machine, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so maybe that is them cutting the holes and everything needed for installation. But then at the same time, the picture we see down below here of the actual CAD image, it doesn't show any bolt holes outside of the two on the far edges.
And
So
another thing that's interesting too, and you mentioned this, Justin, as well. This was all kind of what you were talking about, is the space thing, which makes
yeah,
me think dual over a cam, like what you said,
oh yes,
because
definitely.
the manifolds are so short. You
Right.
don't normally see that at the turbo that close to the head, unless they have like big time space constraints. Which I feel like what you like you said when we were talking kind of off camera about how the space has got to be an issue, which would make more sense being a door over a cam engine, something ahead similar to like the LT6, right?
Yeah, because I mean, if you look at the LT6, the engine in the Z06, there is not much room underneath where you would put those triangular pieces of carbon fiber to cover. There's not much room in there because the headers are already kind of, we'll say, upside down, so to speak. So to
Right.
put these turbos that they're already kind of in the manifold on there, you're gonna that the only way you're fitting them right there is if they're one piece like the images we're seeing here. So I'm on the side. I would say I give it a solid 80% that these pictures are legit. That these are actually the turbo setup from the car. Because I honestly I've seen very few cars that have done one piece kits like this. Unless the only car that I've seen a lot that do this are four cylinders. I have not seen a V8 do something like this. It's not often that you see it like this. It usually the space isn't a problem on a V8, but in this case it
Right.
is.
Oh yeah, most definitely it is. Like, you get in there, I don't know if anybody else on that's watching has taken them your intakes off or your exhaust off or your cats out or whatever else, but space becomes an issue real quick. So the packaging is gonna have to be something pretty compact. I'm hoping it's just a LT6 based head. I mean, that means these manifolds are, bolt on parts if it's based LT6 architecture, right? That means you get your hands on a set of these headers for turbos, and then at that point, sky's the limit, man.
The
And we
sky
just
is
have to,
literally the
only thing we'd
limit
have to
because
do
that's
is,
how far you're going to blow your engine apart too.
yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it'd be nice if the studs were in the same mounting points too. Like you could just,
Yeah.
put studs
Yeah,
in and then set
exactly.
on. That would be really nice.
That would be
So
really nice.
the other
So
thing to kind of keep an eye on here is again, if we look at specifically the ports here versus the port shape of the LT6, the LT6 has a slightly more rounded look to it to me than
Hmm.
the actual port on.
yeah,
Yeah, this is much more of an oval. So again, it is not a carbon copy of the LT6 engine. It's just not. But
right.
it is closer to the LT6 than it was the LT2. Brandon actually showed me some pictures of the LT2, and those ports were much more rounded. So we're somewhere in
Well,
between.
there's already a lot of port work on these things. I mean, if you've had anything off or an intake off or the manifold off or anything like that, and you look down, like if you've seen pictures or you've actually seen, there's a lot of work in these heads already coming from GM. Like there's for them to go from the difference in the manifolds here on the screen. I mean, it speaks to me that it would either be some additional porting, right, or it would be a head casting. I mean, like to get those exhaust gaskets to be that much different, it has to be porting or a new casting. Has to be.
And the other thing too, Justin, looking at the material, that looks like a very, very thick manifold. Like
It
it looks like
does.
it has a lot of meat to it.
It would have
And to
to.
me, like in the future moving forward, like that's a lot of porting room. There's a lot of things that look like can be done with that manifold as far as to move more air, even what they come with.
And not
That's
just that,
exciting as well, right?
that to me, making it that thick tells me they expect this thing to run hot. So basically, if they do intend to make up displacement with boost, these things could potentially be running 15 plus psi right from factory. They're going to get warm, and the thicker that metal is, the better it's going to handle that.
Yeah, and those pictures are credited to YDBT. I'm not going to say what it stands for because I don't want you to get demonetized, but he's a huge Mustang Coyote performance. He works with Lund Racing. I mean, he's got a lot of inside information on manufacturers. He's not really done a whole lot yet for the GM side of things, but this he's like one of the go-to guys as far as coyotes and tuning and building and those things. So he knows a lot of people. So it's probably pretty legit that he's getting this information. So
And David, have you seen any of on the door cam like Ford Motors? Do they have any turbo like aftermarket turbo setups that actually are under the hood, the turbos that are still in the engine bay that aren't underneath or behind the in the exhaust? Or any of them actually in the engine bay?
yeah, they have. I didn't not to get off talking here, but yeah, they have them where they kind of sit up front, come up like here's your throttle body in the front, and they kind of sit on either side. They so that it's almost like the way you would have to do it for the LT6 or a similar motor, where the headers come up
Are you
and they
talking
come up
about
to the
for a
front, like right at the edge of the heads.
on a Stingray or on a C8?
No, we're talking about. I'm talking about like on like say the 50 Coyote.
He's
Oh,
talking like
That's
the
what I'm talking
big
about.
dual overhead cams. So I mean, it's there. It's the same kind of setup that we're looking at here for those. So they just
yeah.
kind of, but you know, it would be like if you flip the LT6
Well,
around, basically, is what it would look like. So
Okay, gotcha.
keep this in mind too. If you guys have seen the turbo kits from like LMR for a C8 Stingray, the turbo, you have basically two options. The turbo either sits underneath, like with the exhaust, or the turbo, if you have a twin turbo setup like we would with the ZR1 here, they sit up in the actual engine bay, like behind the window, because there's not enough space to jam them down in where where I'm thinking these are going to sit, unless you do this, unless it's all one piece like this. And most places aren't going to make a specific part like that. So the
right.
turbo itself sits behind the rear glass on the coupes.
Yep. Well, and that's kind of what Brandon was saying. Like the other dual overhead cam motors, like the Ford Coyote motors, and stuff. They do make them where it comes up. So if you were to be basically, since it's front engine instead of engine, if oriented it, it would be in the exact same spot,
Right.
basically, kind of up behind that glass. So that's what we were getting at. Is it would
And,
literally be the same setup. So
and
Because
the
of
reason I was
space.
asking the question was because because space is such an issue even on the 50 because it's such a large engine. Just going back to the door cam thing, that's why I was asking
yeah.
that question to David. Just seeing like, is
Well,
that
and
what
that is
you're
the thing,
testing it
right,
for?
Brandon? Like push rods, right? Heads are this big or this
Yeah,
wide, right? LS,
yeah.
LT, like this stuff. Now we've got dual overcam LT6. Like you compare that together. I mean, now the heads are this one because they've got two cams on top of the heads versus the one cam in the block pushing the push rods.
Yep.
So you've got two cams on it. That's why even our heads, I mean, they're a lot wider than any LS head from your LS7, your LS3. Like they're a lot
And
wider. Those heads are big.
if you compare the size or the space available in the engine bay from the Z06 to the C8 Stingray, the C8 Stingray had a lot more room available, and they still
Oh
couldn't
yeah.
fit the twin turbo underneath. They had to put them
Right.
up behind the rear glass. So the Z06 engine or any dual overhead cam engine is going to take up even more space in there. They have to really maximize the space they have to work with. And another thing I wanted to mention before we get too much off topic on these pictures is that this dude is holding this thing with one hand. So
Right, right.
it can't be as heavy as
That
it
heavy.
looks, because to me that thing looks like that's got to be like 80 90 pounds, right? And I mean, not that you can't hold that with one hand, but I can see his hand. He doesn't look like he's super he looks like he's on the skinnier side, so it's unlikely that he's like a muscle builder or anything, but like that thing must not weigh that much. And if that's the case, a lot of people were concerned about weight with the ZR1, and rightfully so, because we're adding more stuff to it. And a turbo setup typically roughly 150 to 200 pounds is what's added with after intercoolers and turbos and all the stuff needed to to run it, and that is unfortunately possibly 200 pounds on top of what the C7 or C8 Z06 already weighs, which is too much. So this is a good thing. This is ultimately what I'm saying. The guy that's holding it with one hand tells me it might not actually be that heavy.
And it's probably not iron, right? Like it couldn't be holding
Right.
iron. It's got to be steel or something a
Well,
little lighter
and
than
two,
iron.
like there's people now making centrifugal blowers, GS3 or ES, anyway, for Mustangs that is a composite material or more of a an alloy than like you said iron or whatever, and the kits themselves only weigh like 40 or 50 pounds.
Yeah.
Maybe
So if
they're
an
doing something like
aftermarket
that.
company could pull that off, then sure GM could pull that off. The other thing you mentioned, Justin, about looking at how he's holding it, if you have a engine that's this efficient, even with a little bit of lower compression ratio, whatever, you don't need ginormous turbos, right?
Right.
You don't need this giant big end where you need to pull at the end of the quarter mile or a top speed run. You got small turbos, 6 to 8 pounds of boost, to start with, reasonable, whatever. You could still make 800, no problem, 900, no problem. And
Well,
you don't
See,
need
the
giant turbos to do it
well, the
anymore
thing
because
is
the
too,
impellers, yeah,
they're going to spool so fast too, David. Right? Like that's
because of
going to
that
be the
setup.
thing.
yeah,
Like
There's
those are
like
going to
there's
that
no
small
room
is going to
for
spool
lag.
like bam.
instantly. There will be zero turbo lag. And the other thing is too, like, you know, when you're talking about a $200,000 car, you're not getting base impellers, base ball bearings. I mean, these are going to be billet ball bearings. They're going to be billet impellers. The step up. You can change the geometry on the step up from the impeller. That you can make a turbo that 10 years ago would make 4 pounds of boost to make 8 to 10 pounds of boost just because the efficiency of the internals of the turbos.
Well, John Perkins has a great point. He said that unobtainium is super light. So he's absolutely right about that, especially since there is a good chance that this car is going to be a limited production car.
Unobtainium.
And that
Right.
means ultimately unobtainable. So the other good point that's been brought up over here that I didn't even really think too much about is, what if this is a titanium manifold?
It could
Yeah,
be.
it's not gold. Is it the out? Maybe it would have to be some sort of alloy because it's not that gold hue that you get with
Yeah.
titanium, right? And it
Or the
normally
purplish,
have
yeah.
that gold.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I did want to mention this too, we have to think about they have to make this compatible with like 93 octane, right?
Yeah.
And so the big thing is when you're running boosts, at least you know this, like David, you see this a lot with like the
Yep.
Mustangs, like
Yep.
93 octane only gets you to a certain
Right.
horsepower to where you're just having to pull so much timing, it's like inefficient. And that 900 mark is like around that area to where you kind of run out of things you can do with 93 octane. And also in California, what is it like 91 or what gas they use?
91.
91. And if you're
Yeah.
having to make an engine that it can use 91 octane, it's 900 horsepower. That's going to be hard to do unless it's super efficient. The timing's down, the compression's low. Like
Yep.
to me, that 900 number, if we eclipse that, I'd be very surprised. I think it's going to be
Well,
close.
and that's actually probably one of the better points I think we brought up so far is that you get to a point of diminishing returns with things
Absolutely.
like boost if you have this because of that fact, right? Because
Yep.
of octane, you become octane limited.
Yep.
Doesn't matter how big your blower, how big your turbo is, whatever. You can bump your compression down. You can pull timing out of the motor. You're gonna eventually get octane limited, and
Yep.
that's usually that 8 to 900 mark where you're completely safe that you would warranty this. This is not an aftermarket guy putting it on tuning it, right?
Right.
This is a
Yeah.
warranted vehicle from GM.
Yeah.
So that's a really good point that maybe that 800 there were octane limited and the extra 200 or whatever for the Zora or the 1,000 comes from the electric motors. I don't know, but that's a really
Yeah.
good point that you are going to hit diminishing returns and you're going to be octane limited at that 8 to 900. Doesn't
Well,
matter how efficient your blower is.
what cars do we know that make 900 horsepower, 93 octane? There's not.
No, there's
I
hardly
can't.
any.
I mean, it's
That's what I was going to
look
say.
at look at the Demon. The new Demon. They had
Yeah.
to use E85 to get past that. They did 808 horsepower was like the most that they could do on 93 octane, and that was from Dodge. That's a less efficient engine, obviously. So I just can't
Um
imagine like
the
eclipsing 900, right?
the thing that I have to keep in mind here is, number one, I've said for years that the really nice number to have in a car that's still streetable is around 750 to the wheels.
6 to 700.
Yep.
Yep.
And that, anything over that, number one, you're pushing hard on reliability, but you're pushing hard on getting traction. So let's keep that in mind as we roll forward with Motor One, I think it was, or maybe it was Motor Trend, one of the two, saying that this car is not going to have 850 horsepower. It's going to be 900. And now we're starting to push into, well, wait a second, we're severely octane limited here. And I know for a fact, I had my ZR1 on a dyno not too long ago. My ZR1 is stock. It's not tuned. It's not, pushing more boost than stock. I have an aftermarket catback, which adds a couple horsepower, and a GM performance intake. That's it. With that GM performance intake, after putting in a different air filter, I was gaining 40 horsepower through the power curve, but falling off to only 6 at the end. And the reason was the car was creating so much knock, it was pulling power because it ran out of octane. The only answer was to literally get an octane booster, dump it in the gas tank, and then all of a sudden it held 40 horsepower all the way through the power curve. And that's the problem. We're running out of octane, and it has to run on 93. So maybe the unthinkable part of this is some sort of meth injection, because that would then solve that issue. But meth injection is something that the end user has to be aware of and has to actively engage in.
Right.
And that's something I
Yeah,
don't see
GM's never
GM
done
doing.
that before. Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't see them
I
doing that
agree,
either.
Justin. There's no way they put meth injection on where somebody's going to run their, meth injection out or whatever. You have to stop and fill it.
Yeah,
or what.
because
Like
you
I
blow up
don't
the engine
see
because
that.
you didn't put meth in it. GM's not going to warranty that. I mean, that would happen
But
if it's tuned, unless it's tuned like an E85 sensor or adapter where it can say, okay, we got meth, let's run this tune. Oh, there's no meth. Okay, we'll run this tune. And it's possible they could do that. But I just feel like it's so many extra moving parts that I don't see GM wanting to do that and be responsible for the warranty on this thing.
Right. Right. Well, and again, being limited by not just octane, right, but and I know they have electric cars in their lineup, but EPA, you know
yeah,
fuel standards for fleet stuff, right? Like you can't keep it's limited production. I get it, but there's somebody at GM that is saying, well, guys, we have to get at least this much mile per gallon out of it to help our
100%. And
overall mile
the
per gallon. So
only
there's
reason why they
somebody there.
wouldn't necessarily say that is if this is not a production car. If it's a limited, super limited run, then
Right.
they don't,
Which a
the
Zora.
EPA stuff doesn't matter. But,
Right. Like a Zora.
right.
Yeah.
But even with that said, Squirrel Cage Garage brought up a good point. Technically, the cars are going to run 93, but they have to be able to also run on 91 because there's a lot of states that can't even get 93. So, like, if you take a Z06 or like my C7 ZR1, and if you put 91 in it, it will run, and it will run, without danger of blowing up or anything. But it does pull more timing and pull more power off the table. So it's not even just that this car has to be tuned to run on 93 perfectly. It has to actually, technically, it's got to be able to run on 91 and not blow up.
Yep.
yeah,
Well,
they could do that pretty easily though. I guess with timing and just boost drop. Actually, timing it alone probably would do that. But it's just I don't know. Maybe they can get the peak number 900, and that's like makes peak
Yeah.
like one time because the torque's down low. It's a super efficient head design. Maybe they hit that number, and that's like it's not unobtainable. Obviously,
I don't
it
think it's
just
going
kind
to be
of puts it in
900.
that borderline.
The original rumor was 850, and I could see them hitting 850 at the crank and putting out something like 810 to 820 at the wheels, which is still, let's just be honest here, that is still insane. That is an absolute insane number to be putting to the wheels. But if it's 850, like the rumors suggest, we'd be getting 810 to 820 to the wheels. That would be, again, like you guys had already said, a super efficient engine, but that would be the absolute freaking max of this car on 93 octane.
Right.
And even then,
Well,
I mean, that's still pushing it.
Well, look,
yeah,
it's
and,
still
and to bring up
3,600
a good
pounds.
point about the Z06 is the new Bosch based ECU. This is not the C8 Stingray ECU. This
Right.
ECU is a whole next gen stuff, and it's so good about adding timing, pulling timing, monitoring air fuel. Because I mean, look at what we've done with just cold air intake, exhaust, basically nothing crazy, and the car's picking up 40 rear wheel horsepower on its own, tuning itself as far as the AFR goes by us feeding it more air. It's able to change the tune. So there, I think the 93, 91 thing is not going to be an issue because the ECUs on these cars are next level. But I do agree though that 850 from a manufacturer at the crank claimed I mean, you're going to come in, 700s, give or take. You'll have some heroic, some factory freaks that'll come in around here. But for the most part, you'll be mid sevens, high sevens.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
And
easily doable
if
with
we
this
do
motor.
that 850 with the ZR1, then all of a sudden the Zora makes perfect sense because the 850 plus your 150 horsepower front engine drive
1,000.
motor, there's your 1,000.
Yep.
And I mean, that's been the
Yep.
rumor since the C8 first came out, is that we were going to have a
Yep.
1,000 horsepower Corvette. And there is some proof, guys, that the cars testing are the ZR1 and the Zora. I mentioned this a couple weeks ago whenever we
Yeah.
saw
Yeah.
the SF90 testing. We mentioned it was likely to be the Zora, but we didn't know. We have proof of it now. And I'm going to show you guys right now what I'm talking about because this was really interesting. I just saw this today, and it is, of course, the ZR1 testing with the SF90 again. But the really interesting part of this picture, does anybody see it?
Mm-hmm.
It has the battery cooling radiator in the front. So that's
Yes,
not a
it
ZR1.
does.
That right there is a Zora.
That's a Zora. That's right.
And if you look through all of the spy shots of these cars testing, you will see the cars with the battery cooling radiator and without. So it's not the conversation of, oh, well, maybe the other ones aren't a ZR1 and they're like, a Z06 or something. No, these are ZR1s and Zoras testing together because the ZR1 engine is in the Zora plus the hybrid front motor. So of course they would test them together because they're really testing. They already know the front motor works. They're really testing the rear motor or engine.
And they were thinking about that. They were designing these engines and thinking about this and these numbers 5 years ago, right?
Oh, yeah.
So
Right.
1,000
Right.
horsepower 5 years ago, that would have been unthinkable. Right? Like that's something that would have been unthinkable. So to be a benchmark, it makes perfect sense. That number 1,000. Now it's
Right.
right now 2023, 2024. It's not as big of a deal because you've got EVs and stuff that make that. But at that time when these were designed, that would have been a crazy, unthinkable benchmark to hit 1,000 horsepower.
Well, and the Demon 170 didn't exist then, right?
Yeah, it
Like,
didn't
I mean,
exist
you've
then,
got
right? Yeah.
that 1,000 Halo mark was like, whoa, if we can make 1,000 horsepower. And, Corvette Z06 America said it best. He's like, what we learned from the Demon is that horsepower sells. People
Oh,
were
yeah.
paying, what,
Dude, since
150 over?
Since Dodge brought out the
100 some
Hellcat
$1,000.
engine.
Yeah, and they're paying 150 over on these Demon 170s because they make 1,000 horsepower.
Guys, I got to mention really quick.
On E85 too.
We-
On E85,
We have
so.
almost 300 people in here watching. We should really have
Let's
at
go,
least
guys.
at least
All
200
right.
thumbs ups, guys. Smash the thumbs up. Let us know you're liking the content. This is a lot of really good information today, and of course, really good discussion. Anytime me, Brandon, and David get together, it ends up being exactly like this. So, yeah. And who was it that said? AARPM said that rear wheel looked huge in that Zora shot, and it does. The rear,
It's a steamroller.
and there's a chance, based on some of the spy, or not the spy shots, but the rumors, that the ZR1 is going to bump up the rear tire size from 345 to 355 because the Sport 4S tire already exists in 355, just not a run flat yet. So not that they're going to change the size of the wheels, because they're not. But if you look at the 345 tire on a Z06, it's already a tiny bit stretched. It could go to a 355 and look absolutely fine. Give you a little bit more traction, which this car is definitely going to need. And yeah. So anyway, with these shots showing the Zora testing with the ZR1, we have another question. We have a really, really big question. And that is, the car we're looking at right here is obviously a Zora because it's got that front motor radiator cooler in the front. But if that's the case, then how many of these big wing cars have we seen that are actually ZR1s? Maybe that big wing's not a ZR1 wing, and maybe that's a Zora wing. Something to think about.
Or maybe it's for both. Maybe they use the same wing and same arrow for both, and they just add the all-wheel drive. I don't know.
That's very true.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, we brought it up last week where we were saying, like, how do you push this chassis farther from Z06, ZR1, Zora? So maybe, yeah, it's all aero at that point.
Here's another thing. And there's a really good chance that this ends up being the case. By the way, guys, we are over 300 viewers, which is insane. Guys, please smash the thumbs up. A really good
Thank you, guys.
possibility that I have not heard anybody else mention is what if the ZR1 is the last C8 Corvette performance variant, but you have the option to check the ZTK box or a Zora box. And that Zora
Ooh,
box adds the front motor.
that would be wild.
Yeah, I like that actually.
I do too. I just thought about it and I
You know
was
what?
like,
I
that would be
really like
interesting as
that
an
rather.
option.
Yeah, like it'd be the code, like the old.
Right.
Let's be real. The old LS, sixes, the original ZR1s, right? Or Z06s, the Yanko Camaros. Yeah, let's do that.
Well,
I
back in the
like that. I
day,
support that.
the Z06 was a code. It wasn't
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
actually
Well,
a
like
performance
they
variant.
look at the Yanko Camaros and stuff like that. Same thing. You could order a straight up monster from
Yeah.
GM as a production code. Oh, I like that idea. If GM, if you're listening, please do that.
I
And
think would
then
be
and then next thing you got is a C9, and then we got moving on to the
exactly.
C9 after that.
Exactly. So the
Yeah,
ZR1 would be the
run it for a
swan
few years.
song for the, well, possibly a swan song for the specifically gas powered car, or you could have it as a hybrid. And then this solves the debate of the people who can't stand an E-Ray but still like the wide body stance of it, because now you could get the ZR1 and just not check the Zora box and not get the hybrid motor. You just get the pure ZR1.
No,
So
I like that.
it could be
Yeah.
they could do something like that, or of course their other option is of course to bring out the Zora as a standalone model and make it super rare, but ultimately it's just going to be a ZR1 with a hybrid motor. So is it really
Or
that
I
special?
or Justin, could it really just be an LT6 with the hybrid front, and then they keep the turbo rear wheel drive as a full separate? I mean, that would be, you could still
If
get
they do it
670
that
plus. I guess
if they do that though, they're not
it
going to
wouldn't
hit
be
the
enough power.
1000.
Yeah, it's not enough
Right.
power. I guess when you
Yeah.
add,
Right.
even if you put bigger batteries and bigger front motors, even at that point, just say 200 horsepower, it's still not going to be enough. It's not
Right.
going to. Yeah, I guess they have to do zero on motor. They have
And
to.
not only
Right.
that,
Well,
we still have the bespoke motor in the Z06. GM themselves said that motor was, or engine was, going to stay bespoke to the Z06. So putting that in the Zora or the ZR1 is unlikely to ever happen for that fact. And that was one of the
yeah.
things I stuck true to with the ZR1, is that it was not going to be the Z06 engine with turbos because of that fact alone. Now they can change very little things to make it a totally different um uh engine, but without changing a whole lot of stuff. But at the same time, it's not going to just be pick up the motor out of the Z06 and put it in the ZR1, put turbos on it. There it is.
Yeah, and there's some good comments, like Chopper Larry was saying, like the L88 codes back in the day, and these like Robert Brenda said, make the Zora a Copo car, right? Like the
Yeah,
Copo
exactly.
options, right? Like, I mean, I don't know if that's even within the realm
Well,
of possibility, but I love the idea. I'm
Squirrel
not gonna lie.
Cage Garage is saying that he loves the checkbox idea, but if that was the case, why did they not do that with the Grand Sport / E-Ray? And I'm telling you, if they do this with the ZR1, it's because they didn't do it with the E-Ray / Grand Sport.
Right.
Because if you go online, go on Facebook, go anywhere that someone's posting a picture or a video of the E-Ray, there is a lot of hate out there for that car. I'm not saying it's warranted by any means, because I drove one and I think the E-Ray is an awesome car. It has its place in the performance
It
lineup,
is an
but
awesome car.
the typical Corvette buyer hates the idea that a hybrid Corvette exists. Now, if you give them
Yeah.
the option, they don't have to have a hybrid, or for the people that love it, they can have this car in hybrid. That's the better way to do it. And GM may have just decided to do that. I'm not saying that they did. This is my idea. This is just speculation at this point, but it makes sense. And that's why
No,
Keith French,
I like
that's
this.
exactly why I
Well,
think
and
as a checkbox, it makes more sense, because he says, I'll say it again, 5 variants of the C8, Stingray, Z06, E-Ray, ZR1, Zora, and possibly a Grand Sport. It's too many. It's too many different options.
Yeah.
Unless you start offering
right.
little things as checkboxes that make almost a different car.
Unless they're trying to follow Porsche, which
Yeah.
Porsche not necessarily have all these variant, but they kind of like really focus each of their
Yeah.
variants specifically on
And
one application. So
Chevy has
Right.
done a really good job of that too with the C8 lineup, better than they ever have. You have the Stingray, that's obviously like you're more of a grand touring car, the E-Ray that can kind of do grand touring and a little bit of track, and then the Z06 that's specifically track. It's like
Right.
I have not seen a clearer cut example of what a car's supposed to do than the C8 lineup, at least not in the Corvette generations.
Right.
Because
Well,
C7, it
it's
was not that clear. It was like all the cars kind of did everything. But now it's like they're purposely building these cars to do specific things.
well, actually, I would go back, to be honest with you, Justin, on that. I would kind of counterpoint you on that in the C6 generation. I think it got lost in C7.
Yeah.
But if you had a C6 Z06, that is a track build. It is the suspension when you put it on track, it will beat you to death. It's
Yep.
hard, it's stiff, it's light, it's got everything else. The ZR1 was the king of the hill, but it was not as track focused and as hard to live with every day as the Z06 was. So I would say that some of that DNA was kind of there,
Yeah.
and kind of like ours, right? Like ours maybe, lighter by 150 pounds than the ZR1. The Z06 back then was lighter than the ZR1, even
Yep.
though the ZR1 had the blower and all things. So I think that, like you said, the C7 kind of got convoluted and a little bit lost. Every car doing everything kind of thing. Great cars, love them. ZR1s are insane.
Yep.
But the C6 generation, they kind of did that a little bit. They had the Grand Sport, then they had the Z06. Then
And
the ZR1.
actually, 11 Second Eclipse just brought up a really good point here, too. And he said, don't forget about the fact that the Z51 checkbox on a Stingray. It's almost the same kind of thing. I mean, it's not quite as big as
Right.
adding a hybrid motor, but it's the same concept. You got the Stingray non Z51, which is really not built to be a track car at all. Or you check that Z51 box, and all of a sudden, hey, you got yourself a car that can go on the track. And it's the same kind of concept as doing the ZR1 with a Zora check, because a lot of people a lot of people have heard say about the ZR1, like, what does the ZR1 stand for? I have read that the ZR1 stood for something about Zora. The Z was for Zora, the R is obviously for Zora. So why not make the ZR1 and the Zora kind of the same car? You know,
Synonymous. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
it,
Well, and
it
the
could be.
Z06 has come from, like, GM says Z06 stands for, what was it, Zora's Option 6 or something like that. Like, it's legitimately derived straight
Right.
from his code that he was like, this is the car I want to be, like,
Now,
directly from him. So,
Jack
This
Vac actually says something else that I had just mentioned, that I had heard rumors, and there's no substantial evidence to this from GM or anything, but rumors saying that possibly one of the ZR1s could be supercharged while the ZTK or up models could be turboed. Jack Vac says, could the Zora be supercharged 6.2 with a front electric motor to pay homage to the traditional Corvette? Maybe. It's very unlikely. I don't see GM playing a whole lot with the engines at this point. I think whatever engine goes into the ZR1 is going to be in the Zora as well, minus the front hybrid.
Yeah, and we have to remember too that the chassis itself, like remember when they first designed the Stingray, there was a big issue with it was like cracking like rear
Yeah,
windows
oh,
and
it's
that
stuff.
was
cracking the
that
glass and
was
twisting the
the
edge. Yeah.
1,000 horsepower car. So whatever the
Right.
1,000 horsepower car is going to be, that's the one that they had problems cracking the rear glass.
Yeah, so there's gonna have to be like chassis changes, and the good thing with the turbos is you can modulate a lot of that torque, right? Like it's a lot easier to modulate,
Right.
especially with boost and wastegates. But like on the supercharged setups, which some of the modern superchargers you can still do that a little bit to a degree, but the torque and stuff that's there on those, I just don't think it'd be reasonable with this chassis that you could have 1,000 horsepower with that supercharged instant torque and not like you've seen. I mean, even in your car, Justin. Remember when you had the brace? Like your driveway, didn't you say like it even cracked the brakes, right? Like just to flex
Yep.
with on a stock Z06. So imagine on 1,000 horsepower, and add the weight for the front motors, and you add that on there. There would have to be substantial mods to the chassis, I think, to do a supercharged setup
Well,
with all that instant
between
torque.
doing something with the chassis, I mean, honestly, they GM themselves brought out the X brace, which they claimed, I think, 6% rigidity addition to the chassis with their X brace. There's no guaranteeing that with the ZR1 they don't bring out an X brace that's 30 times thicker that would
I
offer.
feel like they have to,
Yeah,
They
they're
right?
going
have
to
to.
have to. I mean, between that
Yeah.
and the
Force.
fact that with, just like you were saying with turbos, they can limit torque in first and second gear or something until it gets to the point where the car is actually putting the power down versus doing anything weird with twisting the frame.
Right.
Right. I mean, add
200,
turbos, add batteries, add
228
motors.
thumbs up.
4,000
Guys,
pounds. That's a 4,000 pound car. There's no way you can do. There's no way you cannot have
If
4,000 pounds adding
Exactly, if they use
batteries,
the
motors,
ZR1
and turbos.
the ZR1 engine with the E-Ray motor in the front, that's I mean, the E-Ray as it sits now is a hair over 4,000 in the convertible form. If you with the ZR1 engine, which is very likely to weigh more than the Z06 engine or the Stingray engine, plus the additional weight of the battery in the front, you're probably closer to 4,100 pounds, unless they do some magic
Right.
with titanium and stuff. Then
Right.
yeah, and you're talking about 1,000 horsepower at 4,100 pounds, and turbos typically produce a lot more torque than superchargers do. So you're talking about a lot of torque down low. Yeah, I could see all kinds of problems unless they have beefed up the chassis, they add an X brace even thicker, and they really control the torque in the first couple gears.
Yep. So, did anybody else notice the 228 thumbs up? I don't know. I just did.
What? We got 200,
It's
228? David? I can't
235
see
now,
it.
guys. 235.
Oh,
235.
wow.
You guys are nuts
Guys,
tonight. Thank you so much, guys. We
we
appreciate
love
the
our
support.
HPO family. Thank you for the
Heck
support,
yeah.
guys. We love it.
Heck
We
yeah.
love it. But yeah, you know, and back to all we're talking about, right? Like, you know, making power is one thing, right? Getting it to the ground without destroying a powertrain or actually getting a rear wheel drive car to hook is a whole nother ball game,
Yep,
right? You know,
100%.
they're not going to put out something that's got extra 850 horsepower that does a slower 0 to 60 because you can never get it to hook, right? I have enough issues hooking my car, to be honest with you.
So NBA Live actually asked me a question that I've been wanting to bring this up for a while now, and I lost the pictures. But he says, Justin, any thoughts on why none of the test ZR1s and Zoras, the Zora prototypes why they don't have carbon fiber wheels on them? So a subscriber of mine sent me two pictures a while ago of a C8 ZR1 testing on the Nürburgring that had carbon fiber wheels on them that were a totally different style than the Z06 wheels. And they were definitely carbon fiber because they had white barrels. I lost the pictures. It does exist though. So it is very possible that they have a new set of carbon fiber wheels, a different design that they don't want people to see. That's
They
probably
have to,
why
I
you're
feel
not
like.
seeing them.
I was saying
They
they
have to.
cannot not offer
Oh, they're
carbon fiber
definitely going
wheels,
to.
given their yeah,
I think,
100%.
yeah, it's got to be something. Maybe they had to make a little stronger wheel or something for a little bit extra weight. I don't
Yeah.
know, but or they just
Well, this
redesigned it. But it
one
has to be. They have that option.
specifically to me, it looks like it would be less strong because it was like multiple spokes and they were a lot thinner than the 5-spoke Z06 carbon fiber wheel. Now here's something else that's interesting because you know we've talked about the fact that the Zora is testing with the ZR1 and that extra hybrid motor cooler radiator that sits up front. Here's a picture of what has to be a Zora testing with that same configuration, but without the high wing
The
and
high
without
wing,
the
yeah.
big front splitter, without all of the aero, but it still has that massive pass through on the hood. So another thing is if you look at this image, there's no radiator, no visible radiator at least, in the center area where the radiator is on the center of those Z06s and stuff. So what is this thing? Like there's so many different setups here. Like I don't even know what we're looking at half the time. But if we compare this picture where you can clearly see the E-Ray motor cooler
Right.
in the front, if we compare that to this picture, you can it might be kind of hard to see online, but there
Justin,
is a radiator in the front center too.
I wonder if they're doing quarter mile testing without the wing and the drag. They just took the wing off and they're
That
just
is a
testing
great
the quarter
point.
mile time
That is a
with
great
an
point.
unboltable.
Yep.
Take the wing off and they say, hey, you can run whatever, like a 950 or something in the quarter if you take the wing off or
See?
something
Yeah,
like
and
that.
that's a really good point because I think GM's not going to want to screw around with numbers on this. Like they want a 950 or better car,
Yep.
And
right?
that
Like
gives them their number that they're
Yep.
wanting. Whatever number, that gives them a
whatever
template
number. That's right.
to get
You
that
That's
you
number.
right.
hit it right on the head, Brandon. This is exactly why having this group
Yep.
together is such a good thing because I wouldn't have come up with that on my own. But we also do have evidence that GM is spending a lot of time at the drag strip with this car because if we go to the next images here that I wanted to talk about over at the Corvette blogger, we have an actual sticker on the back of these ZR1s that is for the Tucson dragway. So they are literally spending time at the drag track or at the drag strip. So why would they? And it actually, now that you say it, Brandon, this sticker is on the low wing car. So there it is.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Well, and it's funny because that should have been something Brandon and I literally talk about that all the time. Like when we were talking about like our car, high wing versus low wing. Well, it's faster with a low wing because
Right.
it's less drag, and we talk about this stuff all the time. But
Yeah.
it gives them those targets, like you said, to come out to say, and if you offered it where you could take the wing off, right, like
Yeah.
very easily, and that's
And
a selling point.
that's another
Go to the
thing.
track and murder it.
That's another thing that they seem to be doing with the big wing ZR1 is that a lot of people are speculating it's going to have active aero. There's been no evidence that it's going to be active yet, but there is evidence that it's going to be adjustable, just like the C7 ZR1 wing was. But if they make it have a quick disconnect where you could literally just take
Oh,
the wing off, leave it at home, and go to the drag strip,
Yep.
there's a good chance they
Some sort
could
of
do something
security
like that.
disconnect.
Yeah.
that would be the next thing I would put on this car.
Oh,
If
that
you
would be
had a
awesome.
wing like that, and you
Yeah.
could take, you can just
Yeah.
quick disconnect and go to the
Just
track.
boom.
Yeah,
Something
oh man,
that's
dude,
yes. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
that would be absolutely amazing.
Yes, it would. So we have a lot to talk about here, though, guys, because like I said, it's interesting that GM would take a car that is basically unanimous, we'll say, with track and put it through a lot of drag strip, enough drag strip to get a sticker. like,
Right.
and just
Well,
like
and
David said, like they're going to want to come out with this car and be well under 10 seconds in a quarter mile, and this may
and
be the way you do it. You might have to have
yep.
no wing.
And Matt Hurley said it just now
Yeah.
in the comments.
Yeah.
They're benchmarking this SF90.
Yep.
That's a 9496 car,
Yep.
right? In the quarter. That would make sense to be a
9.5.
9.5 target and do just that. That makes absolute sense to be like, hey, let's because that wing and a car that fast with that much power that's going to trap. You know, what's that going to trap, Brandon? 150.
Probably around 150.
Yeah,
Because
like
the
150
plan's
if you're
like
running those times.
154,
Yeah.
like low
So if
nine.
you're trapping that at 154, that's a lot of downforce. You take that off, now you go from a 9.6 to a 9.4. That's 2/10. Easy.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure, easy. Just hit
Yep.
that mile an hour.
Yep. And,
Man.
and again, all this makes sense because they are benchmarking with an SF90, which if anybody who knows an SF90, actually, I know Matt Hurley knows it very well, but that car is absolutely insane. But imagine a ZR1 or a ZR1 Zora, whatever they're going to call it. Imagine that car running just as well on the quarter mile and actual track uses as an SF90 at even half the price.
Well, it's insane. It's insane. And we've talked about how you make this car better. I mean, did anybody see Misha's video on the Z06 on the Nürburgring? He's like,
Right.
it's cheat code. He's
Yeah.
like, this is the best car. He's like, this is insane.
The fact that
And we're getting
that he is as good of a driver as he is, and he flat out said, "Dude, this car is a sub 7-minute car all day long." Like
yeah,
that.
exactly.
That's insane. And I say it every single time I drive my Z06. I pull out of my driveway and I do some stupid, like fast drive down my road. I have to do it. But every time I do, how does it get better than this? It's
don't
so
know.
hard for me to imagine a car that's
I
better
don't
than
know.
the C8 Z06 right now.
Yeah, and I mean this episode has me fired up. As soon as we're
Right.
done, I'm going for a drive.
Right,
Like,
exactly. Yeah, and see, this is another thing. So Robert, this is normally true. He says if you take off the wing, you mess up the entire aero setup of the car. This is normally true. And with
Correct.
the C7 ZR1, GM flat out said, do not, on the ZTK package car, do not take that wing off. Because if you take off the wing and you're running a drag strip time, the car literally becomes like unstable because it is looking to have that wing to balance it out.
That's a good point.
So
That's a good point.
the only way that they could do that with removable wings like that, they would have to have all of this built into the car somehow. The car would have to know when that wing's on and when it's not.
Yeah,
And adjust the
and taking it
suspension.
off for a drag. Yeah, and taking it off for a drag. I mean, it's not going to be as much of a dish as an issue for the downforce part of it, right? Because the downforce is going to slow the car because
Right.
you're going in a straight line. I hope you're not turning on the drag strip.
Yeah, don't do that.
Wrong if you've done that. But when you're down, I mean, you don't really have to worry about the downforce on the rear end as
Right.
much.
Yeah.
But it would really be nice to see like I'm gonna say like a real drag mode, like Brandon's Tesla when you hit drag mode, it like squats down and like
Right.
kind of puts the weight like that, take the wing off and just go for broke, man. You know,
Yeah.
950s, go for broke.
Yeah, and that's what I'm
That would
saying
be
is
awesome.
there would have to be an internal adjustment made before you could just take the wing off.
Yeah, welcome to the club, 10-second, former 11-second Eclipse. He said driving the Z06 is intoxicating.
Yes, it is.
100%,
Dude.
man.
Oh man.
And the sad part is I've owned my car now for over a year. It doesn't get any less intoxicating. Every single time
I
I
hit
take my car
5,000
out, it's
miles.
like the first time I drove it.
100%.
This is it.
100%.
This
Like I
is it.
said, this episode has me fired up, man. I'm going for a drive. We got 250 thumbs up, 300 something people watching. Let's go drive, everybody.
NBA Live says exactly the only thing that could improve the Z06, making it lighter.
Oh, yeah.
The only thing. That's
Making it
literally,
what?
other than that, I honestly, I can't
Lighter.
think of another thing.
I'm
Oh
with you.
yeah, the weight.
I'm
That
with
was
you.
that was what was so special about the C6Z. Like that's what, as David was saying earlier,
Yep.
is the weight. That car was 3,000 pounds with
What-
next to nothing.
What GM
With drag
3,000
did,
pack
pounds
on
with
it.
an LS7.
what GM
Yeah.
did to get to that point was the real special part for me is they made it their job to make that
Yeah.
car as lightweight as possible by shaving the glass to make the glass, I think it was 7 millimeters thick instead of 10 or something. It's like that
Yep.
literally, that shaved off less than a pound, but they were doing it all over the
Yes.
car. They were doing that in conjunction with 100 other things, and
Yep.
that's what made the weight happen. And that's the
I
thing.
mean,
It's
they had like
you can't
magnesium.
you
Yeah.
can't expect to do one thing and save 300 pounds. Like you got to do this in the entirety of the car.
Yeah. Well, and it was, yeah, you said, it's the glass, it's the carbon fiber panels, it's the magnesium front subframe. It's all these things that they made it their job
Yep.
for that model to make it that light. But yeah, no, and you know, we can work out some rides, G Smith, if you're coming to Carlisle. Anybody that's coming to Carlisle, we're going to be there
Yep.
with Justin. He's going to be there with AWE. We're going to have our own booth, guys. We're bringing you guys products to the market that you guys have to come by.
Right behind the Horsepower Obsessed booth will be David and
Yep.
Brandon both. And actually, I almost kind of feel like I don't want to make that two separate booths. Like somehow we should connect them.
That would be
Well,
cool.
and I talked to the guy today, and he said they will technically kind of overlap, so we could
Yeah.
we could figure it out, man.
Yeah, if you're
But
right behind me,
I'm excited to be there.
It's one giant grass area. So
Yeah.
we can do
Yeah.
whatever we want with it, but I think it would be cool to be connected up with it. But
Well, and again, I mean, Brandon and I are excited because we're going to be bringing this, you know, these products to market there, so everybody can pre-order them there. But we're excited to be there with you. We're excited there to anybody that's coming up from the south to Carlisle. Please email us, let us know. It's like we would love for everybody to get together. But you know, this is going to be a great time. And this ZR1 stuff is, you know, it's got everybody drooling. I cannot wait to see, hear every little thing, every teaser. It's awesome. It's
Yeah.
absolutely awesome.
Yep. All right, so if we hit 275 thumbs ups, Aaron AARPM said he'll cold start his new AWE equipped C7 Corvette. No one will hear it, but he'll do it. All right, so
Hey,
before
Justin,
go ahead, Brennan.
what's your record on the likes, Justin?
I think we hit it. I think this is the record.
Yo, this is, yeah.
I don't think we've ever had this many likes before. Actually, it just jumped up to 357 people watching. I'm pretty sure this is a record for us.
Awesome.
But before,
Awesome.
Brandon, you got to show us. You got to show us.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Show everybody.
yeah. This is-
Official Brandon's Garage shirt with the frogs driving the car. It's a real shirt.
We,
How many
Yeah,
did
thank
you get made?
And we're
just
gonna
one.
have.
I just made
No,
this
no,
one.
no, no, no.
Well, David
we
made
have
some.
them. We have them. They are
Yeah.
ordered. We will have them for sale, but we will have them at Carlisle. We'll have some giveaways that people can just come up. If you're a subscriber, we'll have that shirt. We'll have some new DBM racing shirts. We're working on a horsepower pit crew one that we're kind of hoping we can get done as well. But no, we'll have plenty of those for Carlisle. You guys have that came out so good, and I'm hoping our horsepower pit crew comes out good too. But
You know,
yeah, no, that's
the thing that upsets me though is that Brandon's shirt, that whole thing was made as a joke, and it turned
As a
out
joke,
freaking
and it
amazing.
worked.
Like, what the heck?
it freaking works.
It was
man.
making fun of me and my frogs.
Yeah.
at the
Yeah,
shop,
we
yeah.
were, but it's the best ever. It's actually the best. Like, you can't give yourself your own nickname. Your buddies or your
Right.
friends have to do
Yeah,
that.
right.
That's exactly what happened with that shirt and Brandon's logo. I
So,
love it.
real quick, Mean Peterson asks or says, "I really hope the ZR1's at Carlisle." Initially,
Yes.
I really did think it was going to be, but if Rick Conti is correct with his inside sources saying that we're not going to actually see the ZR1 on the 25th of July, and that we're probably not going to actually see the car until January, then no, we're not going to see the ZR1 at Carlisle.
Right.
Again, there's nothing that I've seen suggesting that we're not going to see the car on the 25th, but as I've said in the past, Rick Conti has been right about stuff before, so it would not surprise me if we don't see it on the 25th and we just hear and, get teasers of the car.
Yep.
And they're going to talk to us about specs. Guaranteed, we're going to know the engine, we're going to know the drivetrain, we're going to know the horsepower, we're going to know all that stuff, but it's unlikely we're going to see the car based on what Rick Conti is saying.
Right. Well, and
Oh my
again,
God, Bill Miller. He said
what's
on your
that?
shirt slogan should be "Rip it," like ribbit.
That's so perfect.
That
Yeah,
is
That's
that's
pretty
perfect.
good.
We
good.
need that.
That's
Well, and
genius.
people are commenting about, coming by the booth and being in the horsepower pit crew and everything at Carlisle. Look, we're going to be doing installs of our product at Carlisle. Come by the booth, hang out with us. Justin's going to be right there with AWE right next to us. Everybody's going to be there. The horsepower pit crew's going to be together. Come by and hang out. We would love to have you guys. We're going to have shirts and swag and all the things. But yeah, man, you guys have been great supporting Justin, supporting me, supporting Brandon, and we love meeting you guys. The bash was awesome,
Yeah, it
meeting
was.
people, and I want that times 10
Oh yeah.
at Carlisle.
And it will
You
be.
know,
Just think
Carlisle's just
if we're
massive.
if we're all at Carlisle and then the ZR1's there, just think, and if you miss that, can you imagine like
Yeah.
you have a chance to be there and see the ZR1? If it's even if they just drive it through or something, which I personally think it's going to be there. I think if it's in prototype form or something, I think they're going to have something there. That's my guess. But
G
that's
I
going to
think
Smith
it'll
make
be
it
there in
so
camo.
phenomenal.
G Smith says can't wait to hit the something tent.
Well, come on, he's the beer tent, the beer.
Be
He
a
must
tent.
be my cousin from Boston. The
Yeah.
beer tent.
Yeah, guys. Seriously, like I said last year, this year's the same kind of thing. Come to the booth. I'll be at AWE. These guys will be right there with me. Come up to the booth and hang out. Literally pull up a chair, hang out. You never have to leave. I would love to have as many of you sitting there hanging out with us as possible. We can make it
Absolutely.
a real life Corvette Weekly where we're all sitting around talking cars and there is no internet and there is no chat. We're literally
Awesome.
Hey,
just
Jeff,
there doing it.
do you have any plans for like dinner stuff like you did with the bash? Do you have anything like that planned? Let's
Me
all
and
get together
Shane,
afterwards.
will be working on that, I'm sure. Shane is kind of my
Okay.
go-to guy for that stuff, but there's a bunch of places to eat around there. So we'll definitely be doing something.
Well, and two, again, as we get closer, we'll keep reminding you guys, if anybody's coming up, the day before from the south, wants to tag along in caravan, we're going to be coming up. We would love to have you join, and then we'll keep dropping teasers on what we're going to be unveiling, and we'll be doing installs like right that we're going to do Justin's cars. So again, guys,
Will mine be
join
the
us.
first?
Yeah, yeah, yep.
I
You'll
can
be the
always get
first.
behind that.
Yeah, right. Well, and again too, like I love what you said about just coming up and it's a Corvette Weekly in-person live event, right? Like I
100%.
love
Yeah.
that feel of that
There's
when
no
you're like,
chat. There's no chat
no
system.
chat, let's do it.
Yeah, we just talk.
Yeah, I love it. Well, that's what happened right before we went on. Everybody, I mean, like that, we basically did like 2 minutes of this show just ourselves talking about the
Right.
turbos
Exactly.
before we came on. So.
Yep. All right, guys. Well, I think we're going to wrap this up. We have our hour accounted for. We got more than enough thumbs ups. We got almost 300 thumbs ups. You guys are killing it tonight.
Awesome, guys.
Yeah, really,
Awesome.
really a good show tonight. Jeremy, you definitely should come to Carlisle this year, man. I really hope you do. I really, really hope you do. Let me
come with
know
us, Jeremy.
if there's anything I can do to help you make that decision. I'll gladly do it because I'd love to have you there. But the date for Carlisle is right around the last week of July or August.
I
I'm
think
sorry.
it's 22, 23, 24. It's Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
That is it. So
It's in August.
yeah, it's near the end of the month. Usually it is the last week of the month. It's just
Well, hurry up and hit that like button if you just got here, Jeffrey Duda.
Jeff.
He just popped into the comments, just got here. I was like, well, hurry up and hit the like button.
Yeah, hurry up and hit the like. All right, guys. Again, big thank you for the show tonight. You guys really killed it. I hope to see all of you at Carlisle. Of course, I'll see you before then as well. But awesome time. Really appreciate the support as always. Next week it's gonna be the same kind of stuff. So be sure to tune in, same time, same place next week. And big thumbs up on your way out. Big thank you to Brandon and David for taking some time out of their day to join us here and talk cars.
Yeah.
we'll
Love
see.
it.
We'll see you guys next week, same time, same place.
Thanks, guys.
See you later.